Welcome to Garden Wise Adventures. My name is Malie, and today is the day we're going to do the summer pruning on my fruit trees. Now, I live in Utah, zone 6/7. It's mid-August and a little bit late to be doing pruning on my fruit trees. Most people here in Utah suggest not pruning past July, but this year our weather was in the hundreds for most of July. It's finally cooled down the last couple of days, and as you can probably tell by the sweat pouring down my face, it's still warm, but it is in the 80s. And it's actually quite humid. We've had a lot of storms come through, and we've had almost an inch in the last couple of days. Now, I don't expect it to rain anymore today, which if it was going to rain, I would probably delay my pruning, because if you prune just before it rains or while it's raining, that's when you can start spreading diseases through your fruit trees. So I'm going to start on my almond tree, and we're going to show you what we're going to prune, talk a little bit about why we prune, and then I'll put a link down below to Ann Ralph's Grow a Little Fruit Tree, also to Dave Wilson Nursery Backyard Orcharding. Now, just a little history on how long I've been using the backyard orcharding methods and Grow a Little Fruit Tree methods. In the early 90s, I was a member of the California Rare Fruit Growers, and we had the opportunity to go listen to Ed LaVio in one of their test orchards in Ojai and learn the pruning method there. And I had probably 10 to 15 fruit trees that I pruned that way in California until around 2007 when I moved here to Utah. I immediately planted fruit trees here and have used that method ever since. So I have used this method for quite a number of years and know that it actually works. So let's show you my almond tree and talk a little bit about how we're going to prune it. Now, hopefully we're going to be able to get this completed before my camera turns off because of the heat, because it is actually feeling pretty warm right now, even though we haven't been running very long. But this is my almond tree. We're going to look at the different years of growth. So if you look down here at this wood is really dark. You can see a little area where I had pruned it, I think it was 2 years ago. We got this much growth, so all the way down. It's kind of hard with all these leaves. All the way down to there, all the way up to here. You can see where I pruned it earlier this spring. So I have not pruned it since because for some reason we had a little bit of a rough start this spring. We didn't get a lot of growth until the last couple of months. So the June pruning was not ready, but since June, we have quite a bit of growth. You can see all the growth that it's put on. Now I want to keep this tree relatively short. I think I would like to keep it maybe about 8 feet tall in this spot and also restrict the width a little bit. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through and we're going to cut off the height, and then we're going to figure out how wide I want it to go and cut the branches off there. Now, the one thing that we're not going to do is go through and do any shaping. This is not the time of year to go into the hardwood, to the old wood, and cut out branches to clean out the center. I could have done that in June when it was a little bit cooler, but right now all we're going to do is reduce the height. Now, the reason I'm going to do this now rather than waiting for next spring to do it is in the spring, when the trees start their growth, they have a lot of hormone in the tips of their branches. So when you cut the ends off of those branches, that forces the hormones to be pushed into the lower buds, and those push growth. So if you take a lot of growth off of your trees during the spring, you'll get a lot of water sprouts and you'll get a lot of excess growth. When you take it off in the summer, right now, just before it starts to go dormant, the tree is getting ready to take all the energy that is created by photosynthesis and push it down to the roots to be dormant over the winter. Now, if we take the leaves off of the top, that's going to be removing some of the vigor and some of the energy that's going to go into the roots. So we'll have a little bit less growth next spring, but we're also going to have bushier growth so that we can get more fruit. So let me see if I could get a good angle on this, not have the camera shut off because of the heat, and show you how we're going to do this. Now, most pruning to control growth in the summer is really easy. Basically, we're going to choose a height that we want it, and then we're going to cut everything off to that height. I'm not going to be really careful about where I cut. For example, always choosing an outward facing bed, because any new growth that happens next spring that doesn't go where we want it, we're just going to clean up. The spring is the time when I clean up the growth, cut out crossing branches, open up the canopy. Summer is when I just control height and control vigor. So I'm basically going to choose a height, and there's a branch in the center. I don't know if you can see it, and I think we're going to control it for this height. This height, let's take this branch off to that height, is about right there. Now, I did cut it above a leaf but the rest of them I'm not going to be so careful. So we're just going to take all of them and cut them off. Now that the height's reduced, I'm going to see if there's any branches on the sides that need to be taken in. Now, by doing it this time of year, I am hoping not to spark any new growth. This time of year, the growth is slowed way down, and like I said, it's starting to get ready for dormancy. We can have freezes by mid-September, and everything's dormant by the end of October. So we're looking through here, and I'm actually not seeing any branches that I want to cut off from the sides. So let's go over and look at a smaller tree and see what I'm going to do to that one. So the almond that I showed you before is a Bounty almond. It's a late blooming hardy almond, early ripening, and we've got 2 fruit on that. I'll go show you that in just a minute, and they should be ripening sometime in September. And this one is a 2-year-old tree. So the other one was 4 years old, this one is 2 years old. And honestly, it's the right height. What we're going to do though is we're going to go cut the tops off of them so we can spark lower growth next year. And to do that, let me see if I can do this one-handed. I think I'm just going to take it down to these 2 branches right here. You can see how there's a branch right there. So we cut it just above those. We've got some new branches coming down here. So I'm going to cut that one off. And then I'm going to do the same on this side. So way down here, let me see if I can get in there. So that's going to spark some branching for next year. Now I wanted to show you how early these trees tend to fruit. So we've got a fruit right there that hasn't fallen off. And I am hoping it ripens. They're supposed to ripen in, let's see, September. And this is mid-August. So we have a good chance of that ripening. This one is a Nikita's Pride, which is the pollinizer for the Bounty. And let's show you I have 3 nuts on the Bounty. There's one right here. Hopefully you can see it. And then there's 2 over here. And then there's 2 back here. Hopefully you can see those. So now we're back here with my pluot, and we're going to be pruning this pluot back. This one is a little bit more vigorous tree, so I'm going to show you what it looks like when we're summer pruning a more vigorous tree. This is also a 4th year for this tree. I did do a June prune, and I will link a playlist of all the pruning that I've done on these trees. We've actually captured when I planted them. But if you can see down here with all the sunlight shining, it's really hard. Oh yeah, there we go. You can see how low I cut the branches. The place where it's forking off is where I cut it when I planted them. Then we had a 1st year cut, 2nd year cut, 3rd year cut, 4th year cut. And then let me show you where I pruned it in June. So this is where I pruned it in June. So it sparked a lot of new growth this summer. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take it back to the height that I want this tree. I want to keep this tree about 6 feet tall, so we are going to cut it around 6 feet tall. Now I could go and individually cut each branch to the height that I want it, but that's going to take a long time. And frankly speaking, when I learned this method from Ed, he said he liked to take hedge trimmers and do his summer pruning. Now I don't know if he would suggest that again, but and I don't use hedge trimmers, but what I do is I will grab several branches at once and cut them to the height and the width that I want. So we're going to do width pruning and height pruning at the same time here. So we're just going to take them, and the ones around the edges, I'm going to aim where I want them. If I cut, let me see if I can get you closer here. If I cut this branch to an outward facing leaf, like this one right here, the new branch would come out from here and stretch out into a pathway. But because I cut it to this one, it's going to go up. So you can actually directionally prune your branches by where you decide to put your cuts. This one is going to point out this way. This one's going to point up this way. So I'm only worried about directionally pruning on the outside branches. Matter of fact, let's show you down here. So in June, we actually had a branch that was coming into the path. You can see where the cut was down here. Move that little leaf. I cut right there, and that forced this branch to go straight up. So it is no longer impeding the pathway, and it is still branching. Another thing that I've heard that people worry about with summer pruning is there's fruit on the tree when you prune it. And it is true that you will accidentally knock off some of the fruit, but you're pruning the new growth that is after the fruit has set. So you're pruning above where the fruit has set, and you're actually creating older branches, fruiting branches, so it does fruit early. I actually had an avocado that I worked on in Southern California that I summer pruned twice a year and then did the spring pruning, and it bore fruit starting its third season, which is almost unheard of in California for avocados. Avocados take typically 7 to 10 years before they fruit. And this young tree, it was a young whip when I planted it. By its third season, it was bearing fruit. By its fourth season, it was just completely covered in fruit. So we're going to continue on with this, and I'll show you what it looks like after. Another thing I'm not going to worry about that I do worry about in the spring. In the spring, I like to tip every single branch so they branch out. Right now, I'm just working on controlling height. I'm not going to worry about tipping because I don't need new growth before the fall hits. Now I think I finished with the height. That's about 6-7 feet tall. But we're going to look at the width. Now I have shoved a ton of fruit trees into my food forest. And that means I'm going to need to be very, very vigilant in my pruning, because I need to be able to access trees to prune them. I need to be able to access the food forest to be able to get in and around it. So I may need to come in and actually take some branches out of the sides. So let's go through and see which ones we're going to take out. So we have a beautiful little branch here, this one right here, that is arching out and going towards this path. Now I think I'm going to allow that one to come out. I did train that one to go out a little bit further just for the shape of the tree. But I'm going to need to watch this one very carefully, and probably what I'm going to do is I don't want it to go out any further. So we're going to take this little branch right here, cut that one, this little branch up here. Let's see if we can do this. We're doing it with the wrong hand even. Ah, I cut that too. Well, that's okay. We'll just take this and cut that off. So now it's going to grow straight up. So that's how I control that side. Let's see if there's any more. We've got this guy that we're going to need to watch, but it is actually, let's see, we've got one little branch, side branch right here that we can take off so it doesn't go into my path. We've got one arching right out here that can take over a path, and there's no good reason for that branch. So we're going to go all the way to where it attaches. Let's see if I can see where it attaches. And with my left hand, cut it off there. We've got another one over here. Try not to squish my strawberries. We've got one growing up that way. We'll take care of that one in the spring. But this one right here, we're going to take off down by the trunk. We've got several branches growing out into my path this way. We're going to take the major part of it off, and then we'll deal with that part in the spring. Got some little branches over here. One there, one there. So we cut those off. All of these little branches here are connected down here. So I think, I don't know if I'm going to be able to do this with my left hand. We're going to take those off. And then, let's see, this here, this here, and that way we've freed up my little gomi berry that's kind of squished in here. So this gomi berry is done really well, and I did tip the gomi berry so it'll be bushier. So sorry for the sweat pouring down my face. It's just been really, really hot. There's one other group of trees that I'm going to do that I'm not going to film because it's just going to be too hard to film, and let me show you those. We'll just do a before and after shot on that one, if I can finish it by tonight, because I've got to edit this film tonight. But let's show you the other trees that I've got to tackle. So way back here behind my masses of squash and melons, I have my one pear and two apples that are planted in the same hole. Now these are on a very steep slope. They're not as tall as they look, but they have gotten a lot taller this year than they normally do. I would say those are probably close to, well, they're somewhere between 8 and 10 feet tall. So let's see if we can climb in there and show you what it looks like. So here we are a little closer. I'm gonna have to climb through all my vines. This is a problem this is a problem that I have. I do overplant. So we've got good production on these. This is my Bartlett pear. And then on the other side, over here, we have a Jonah Gold apple. And then way over here, we have a Fuji apple. So let's see if we can get you underneath and show you what the trunks look like. So it's really nice what you get under here. But under here, you can see how these were planted. And they're all kind of engulfed by my junipers now. But we've got one trunk there, another trunk here, another trunk there, and you can kind of see how closely they were planted and how they were pruned. We did the same knee-high cut that we did on the pluots, and these are 15-year-old trees. So what I've got to do is I have got to climb all the way around this tree and see if I can reach up as high as I can and just cut the height off of it. I think if I can do that this time of year, I can reduce some of the vigor on this. I may not be able to reach all the branches, but we're going to do what we can. Now that I think about it, that's going to take quite some time, and I probably won't be able to get the after picture for you, but we'll see if we can post that in a different video. Now, there are some caveats to planting in this method, to using the grow a little fruit tree method, that I wanted to talk about. Number one, if you're like me and love to overplant and you decide that you're going to use the grow a little fruit tree method and you shove everything into a small space, you have to keep up with the pruning. You have to look at yourself and say, am I the kind of person who's going to always be able to keep up with pruning all my fruit trees 3 times a year? Once in the spring, once in June, and once in August. Because if you're going to keep them small, you need to prune that way. Now, I do have to say that after about 6 years of pruning my apples, other than this year, I don't know what the deal is this year with the growth, but with my apples, my pear, my peaches that I've done, I've been able to prune all of those only once a year now. It took about 6 years for them to kind of dwarf themselves, but they dwarfed themselves, and now I don't have to prune 3 times a year on my older ones. It's my younger ones that I've got to keep up with. And if I can keep up with those, maybe they will dwarf themselves, maybe they won't. But I have to remind myself that I've made this commitment. I've committed to prune my trees small because I've shoved them in a small space. Now, the benefits of this is early fruiting. Your fruit trees are the right size. I don't ever have to use a ladder for pruning. I don't have to use a ladder for thinning. I don't have to use a ladder for harvesting. And it hasn't been harmful for the trees. When Ed did the class, he said that that method had been used for 30 years prior to him doing that class, and he didn't notice any real reduction in the life of the tree other than maybe about 5 years. But fruit trees have limited lifespans anyway, so I say the convenience of having a shorter tree, plus you get the greater variety that is offered in the standard size trees and the semi-dwarf sized trees that you don't get in the dwarf sized trees. You get all of that variety, and I think it's worth it. So I would love to hear if you've used this method at all, and if you have, what have been the benefits for you and what have been the downfalls, because everybody's different. One other thing before we go is you get to choose how you prune your trees. If you're the type of person who likes to be very, very careful how you prune and always prune to an outward facing bed, and you have a lot of time to prune your trees, you can do it that way when you're summer pruning. If you're the kind of person like me who just wants to get it done very quickly, this tree behind me took 10 minutes, you can do it that way. You can just basically shave it across the top. So summer pruning does not have any real rules other than the time of year to do it, which is June and August, or June and late July, and choosing the height that you want your trees and keeping them at that height. So hopefully this video has been helpful for you. If it has been helpful, I hope you like, subscribe, share it with your friends, and go have a wonderful garden adventure.